Imagine, just for a second, dedicating your entire existence to the relentless accumulation of facts.
Right, just pure data gathering.
Exactly. Like, you spend decades reading thousands of books, you earn multiple advanced degrees, and you hoard this veritable mountain of data in your mind.
Yeah.
You essentially become a walking, talking encyclopedia.
Which sounds great on paper.
It does. But imagine arriving at the end of your life, only to realize that despite all that data, you were completely, fundamentally foolish.
Wow.
Like, you understand the atomic weight of everything, but the actual value of nothing.
That is a harsh realization.
It really is. And today, we are looking at a text that claims our modern data-obsessed culture is doing exactly this.
I mean, we are. We're essentially building a 1,000-horsepower Ferrari engine, but, forgetting to install a steering wheel.
That is the perfect way to put it. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are bringing you, and yes, I mean you, the listener, because you are the crucial third participant in this journey along for a really meticulous exploration into the profound mechanics of your own mind.
It's going to be a heavy one.
Oh, absolutely. We are unpacking Chapter 2 of a truly monumental and honestly often misunderstood 19th century text, Morals and Dogma.
Right.
This specific chapter is titled The Fellow Craft.
And, to really grasp the gravity of what the fellow craft means, we need to strip away the modern mystique. We need to look at the historical, literal origins of that term.
Because it wasn't always just a metaphor, right?
Exactly. Before it was a philosophical concept, it was a practical reality in the medieval stonemason guilds.
Okay.
You didn't just walk onto a construction site and start building a cathedral.
Yeah, they wouldn't let you near the important stuff.
Not at all. You started as an entered apprentice. That was the baseline.
Which we covered in the last step, the Chapter 1 Deep Dive.
Right. And your entire job back then was just quarrying the rough stone.
Yeah.
Just hacking away the useless, jagged edges.
Pure manual labor.
Yeah, it was manual, repetitive discipline. And that aligns perfectly with Chapter 1 of this text, which was all about basic self-control.
Getting your baseline impulses in check.
Exactly, getting the raw materials ready.
But today, the mission of this deep dive is to explore the massive leap to what happens next. The awakening of the intellect.
The fellow craft stage.
Right. Because a fellow craft in those old guilds wasn't just hauling rocks anymore. They were the journeymen.
They were the ones who actually had to understand the geometry.
Yes. The load-bearing architecture, the blueprint. They had to know why the stone was cut a certain way.
Which is a huge cognitive leap.
It is. And the text takes that literal history and turns it into a psychological roadmap. The goal here isn't just to learn a list of historical facts or, memorize new vocabulary.
No, not at all.
This chapter is trying to teach us how to think, how to question the default settings of the world, and how to see truth beyond the surface appearances we are fed every single day.
Which sets an intensely challenging philosophical tone, honestly.
It really does.
Because this text, penned by Albert Pike in 1871, it fundamentally indicts our modern obsession with plain, easily digestible data.
Oh, man. If he thought 1871 was bad, imagine him looking at us today.
Right. I mean, we live in an era of the 30-second video explanation, the bulleted summary, the immediate search engine result.
We just want the answer right now.
Exactly. But this chapter demands a total transformation of your cognitive habits. It asks you to stop being a passive consumer of information.
A passive learner.
Yeah, and instead become an active, relentless seeker of truth. The fellow craft is the architect of their own intellect.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we know we need to awaken the intellect. That is the stated goal of the fellow craft stage. But how does that awakening actually get triggered? If we aren't just reading facts off a screen, what is the mechanism?
This is where it gets really interesting.
Because the text argues something really counterintuitive here. It says the intellect isn't awakened through plain, straightforward explanation.
No, it's not.
It is awakened through mystery. It is awakened through symbols.
Yes. Pike explains that in ancient antiquity, within the old mystery schools, the deepest philosophical and moral teachings were deliberately hidden.
Deliberately hidden?
Yeah. They were never given plainly to students. Instead, they were encoded in complex symbols.
Like architectural metaphors and allegories.
Exactly. The truth was veiled.
Which sounds completely backwards to how we design education today. I mean, think about it. If I take a university course today and the professor deliberately hides the answers behind a cryptic riddle, I'm going to give them a terrible review.
Oh, they'd be fired.
Right. We demand that the syllabus be perfectly clear. We want all the friction removed. So why on earth would ancient educators intentionally hide the truth?
Well, because of a fundamental neuropsychological reality that the text highlights, and honestly, one that modern cognitive science actually completely validates.
Oh, really? Modern science backs this up.
Absolutely. The core idea is that truth cannot simply be handed over.
Okay.
If I just hand you a profound, life-altering truth about human existence, say, I just texted to you, it bounces right off your psyche.
Because it's too easy.
Exactly. It must be actively discovered by the individual. Symbols are specifically engineered to engage the mind. They create cognitive friction.
Cognitive friction. I like that phrase.
Yeah, they force you to interpret.
Mm.
And through the agonizing process of interpretation, you actually internalize the lesson.
I want to push back on that a little bit, or at least dig into the mechanics of it.
Sure.
Because if I read a straightforward history book, I do learn things. Why does the text assume a plain explanation is so ineffective?
That's a fair question.
Is it just about making it feel exclusive, like some secret club? Or is there a genuine biological or psychological difference in how the brain processes a mystery versus a fact?
What's fascinating here is the underlying cognitive science of discovery, specifically something modern psychologists call the generation effect.
The generation effect. Okay, what is that?
So when a piece of data is just handed to us, our brains essentially file it away in a passive, low-priority state.
Like cramming for a test.
Right. We memorize it for the test, maybe, but we don't feel it. It doesn't permanently alter our neural pathways.
It just sits there.
Exactly. But when that same truth is encoded in a symbol, a riddle, a piece of architecture, a metaphor, the mind is forced to wrestle with it.
You have to actually work for it.
You have to turn it over in your head. You have to ask, why did they use a square? Why a compass? What does this represent about human morality?
Right.
And in the act of generating the answer yourself, you create a deeper, far more permanent neurological connection.
Because you built the bridge yourself.
Exactly. The aha moment of discovery triggers a massive release of dopamine. It cements the concept into your very identity in a way that rote memorization simply cannot achieve.
It's the friction. The friction is the point.
Absolutely.
I was thinking about how to visualize this, and it reminds me of modern video games or even those escape rooms that are so popular right now.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Right. Imagine you pay $40 to go to an escape room with a group of friends. They lock you in a room filled with cryptic symbols, black lights, locked boxes.
It's all very dramatic.
Very dramatic. Now imagine if the guy running the place just walked in, handed you the master key to the final door, and said, here you go. Here's the answer. You win. Head on out.
You wouldn't be grateful. You would be furious.
You would demand a refund immediately.
Right, because you didn't get to do anything.
Exactly. You would feel completely cheated because the entire value of the experience is the frustration. The value is in testing different clues.
Hitting dead ends.
Hitting dead ends, arguing with your friends about what a symbol means. And finally, that massive euphoric rush when you realize the hidden code on the wall opens the safe.
Which is that dopamine hit we were talking about.
Yes. If someone just hands you the cheat code, the experience is entirely hollow. You walk out having learned nothing about your own problem-solving skills and feeling absolutely nothing.
Right.
But if you solve the riddle yourself, the solution becomes a part of you. You talk about it for weeks.
That is a brilliant modern translation of what this text is saying about ancient symbols. The symbol is the escape room for the mind.
I love that. The escape room for the mind.
Think about a literal Masonic symbol that Pike discusses, like the plumb line.
Okay, what's a plumb line?
It's just a simple weight on a string used by builders to ensure a wall is perfectly vertical. Gravity pulls it straight down.
Right, make sure the building doesn't lean.
Exactly. Now, if the ancient philosophers just wrote down a rule that said, always act with upright moral rectitude and don't deviate.
You would read it, nod, and immediately forget it the moment you were tempted to lie.
Because it's just another rule on a piece of paper.
Right, it's just a bumper sticker.
Precisely. But if they hand you a physical plumb line and tell you that your own soul is the wall being built,
Oh, wow.
and you must constantly check your actions against the unyielding gravity of the universe, now you have a mental technology.
That's entirely different.
You have to work to understand the metaphor. And the intellectual labor required to decode that metaphor is the transformation.
So you aren't just memorizing a moral code.
No, you are building the architecture of your own consciousness.
That is incredibly powerful. So for you listening right now, apply this to your own life. Think about your daily habits.
Yeah, how we interact with media.
Exactly. How often do you completely gloss over easily acquired information? You probably doom scroll past 100 life-changing inspirational quotes on social media every single day.
We all do it.
You read them, you might even hit like, but you feel absolutely nothing, and your behavior doesn't change an inch.
Not an inch.
Now compare that hollow consumption to the lessons you had to learn the hard way. The truths you had to decipher through your own painful experiences.
A devastating breakup.
A massive career failure, or just intense, deliberate study. Those hard-won truths are the ones that actually govern your behavior, aren't they?
It is the stark difference between reading a travel guide about scaling a mountain and actually freezing your hands on the rock face.
Wow, yeah.
The text is urging the fellowcraft to stop reading the brochure and become the climber. The symbols are the handholds.
But you have to pull yourself up.
The ancient teachers left them there, but you have to pull your own weight up. If there is no struggle, there is no genuine awakening.
Which naturally drives us to the next massive question in this text. If discovering truth through the friction of symbols is the method,
right,
what exactly is the goal? Because if we are doing all this brutal climbing, all this cognitive decoding, what is the prize at the top?
It's a great question.
It cannot just be the ability to win at trivia night. The text is vehemently clear that the goal is not just hoarding a giant pile of facts.
Far from it. This brings us to a central, uncompromising message of Chapter 2.
Okay.
The sharp, almost violent distinction between knowledge and wisdom.
Knowledge and wisdom.
Yes, these are terms we throw around interchangeably today. But in the context of this text, and in classical philosophy generally, they are entirely different ecosystems of thought.
How does the text define them?
Well, knowledge is defined purely as information, facts, and data. It is knowing the chemical composition of water, knowing the exact date the French Revolution started, or memorizing the syntax of a coding language.
Okay, so knowledge is the raw data.
Exactly.
But people use wisdom interchangeably with knowledge all the time. Like, if I'm playing devil's advocate here,
Sure.
if I have enough data, don't I eventually become wise by default?
That's the modern assumption, isn't it?
Right. If I read enough history books, doesn't wisdom just naturally emerge from the sheer volume of facts? Or is the text saying wisdom is an entirely different biological mechanism?
The text insists it is an entirely different mechanism. Wisdom does not automatically emerge from a surplus of data.
It doesn't.
No. Wisdom is understanding, judgment, and moral application. It is the insight required to know what to do with the facts.
Oh, what to do with them.
Right. Pike explicitly warns that a person can spend an entire lifetime gathering knowledge. They can acquire multiple PhDs, memorize vast libraries of history, become an undisputed expert in a technical field.
And still not be wise.
And still completely lack wisdom.
Wow. So you can have a lifetime of gathering impeccable data and still end up fundamentally foolish in how you actually live.
Yes. Because true education in this philosophical framework requires discernment and moral grounding.
Which is completely missing from just rote data.
Exactly. Let's unpack the tragic irony of the modern knowledge hoarder.
Let's do it.
We live in a culture that incentivizes and rewards the relentless accumulation of data. People brag about reading 200 books a year.
Oh yeah, the hustle culture readers.
They listen to every deep dive at double speed. They absorb endless, infinite streams of global news.
Just maximizing input.
But the text argues that knowledge by itself is entirely inert. It is completely dead weight until it is synthesized and transformed into what it calls wise action.
Inert, like potential energy. It's just sitting there in a battery, slowly losing its charge.
Precisely. Without moral understanding and the practical judgment of how to apply those facts to improve oneself or alleviate the suffering of society, the facts are worse than useless.
Worse, useless.
Yes, they are a distraction. They give the illusion of intellectual growth without requiring any actual internal change.
I really want to press on this because it challenges the entire premise of our modern technological society.
It absolutely does.
We live in an incredibly complex world. Isn't gathering massive amounts of data exactly how we solve complex problems?
That is the argument, yes.
I mean, look at how we build artificial intelligence today. We train large language models by scraping the entire internet and feeding them trillions of data points. We literally build quote-unquote intelligence through raw knowledge accumulation.
Right.
How can gathering knowledge ever be framed as a potential negative or a dead end?
That is the perfect modern counterargument, but it actually proves Pike's point beautifully.
Really? How so?
Look at those large language models. They have access to virtually all human knowledge.
Yeah, they know everything.
They can recite the entire works of Shakespeare, explain quantum mechanics, and write legal briefs in seconds. They possess near infinite knowledge.
Right.
But do they possess a shred of wisdom?
Oh, I see what you mean.
No, because they do not exist in a physical body, they do not face mortality, they do not feel the weight of moral consequences, and they have no intent.
They just predict the next word.
Exactly. Data is merely the tool. Wisdom is the blueprint and the moral intent.
That distinction is incredibly sharp.
Think of knowledge as a hammer, some nails, and a pile of wood. Having 1,000 hammers and 10,000 nails does not mean you know how to build a house that will keep a family warm and safe from a storm.
You just have a very well-stocked garage.
Right. A hammer is completely useless without the blueprint, and far more importantly, without the compassionate purpose of building shelter.
The intent.
Wisdom is the blueprint, and wisdom is the intent. If you have the tools but no wisdom, you are just a person standing in a pile of sharp objects.
Oh, I love that. You are just a person standing in a pile of sharp objects. The data is just the raw material.
Yes.
It takes me back to this image I can't shake. Picture someone who has spent a decade reading 100 dense textbooks on the biomechanics of swimming.
Okay, let's picture this.
They understand exactly how fluid dynamics work. They know the precise angles the arm should enter the water to minimize drag.
They've memorized the physics of it.
Yes, they know the cardiovascular output required for a freestyle stroke. They have flawless, scientifically verifiable knowledge. But they have never, not once, actually touched the water.
The moment you threw them in the deep end, they would panic and drown.
Exactly. They would sink like a stone because their brain would be screaming equations while their body failed to float.
Because they have no embodied experience.
Right. Compare that to someone who has never read a physics book in their entire life, but who grew up on the ocean.
Oh, that's a great contrast.
They have spent years learning to navigate the rip currents. They feel the water. They know intuitively when to hold their breath, when to ride the wave, and when to let the current take them.
They have the wisdom.
That person has the wisdom of the water. Wisdom absolutely requires the application of knowledge in the real world. It has to be lived.
And that lived application requires a moral compass, which is precisely what the Fellowcraft stage is trying to develop within the individual.
It's all connected.
You are awakening the intellect not just to be a trivia champion, but to be an effective, morally grounded force in the world. You are taking the raw stone you chipped away at in the first stage of your development, and now you are deciding what kind of temple you're going to build with it.
Okay, so if wisdom is our ultimate goal, if we're trying to apply knowledge to actually build something meaningful and moral, where do we apply it?
That's the next big step.
What is the scope of our blueprint? Because we have to apply it to the complex world around us. And this leads to one of Pike's most fascinating and honestly highly controversial takes on the great disciplines of human thought.
Yes, the text takes a very firm, unifying stance on how we should view the major avenues of human inquiry.
And it goes completely against the modern grain.
It really does. It directly challenges a notion that is incredibly pervasive today, perhaps even more so now than in the 1870s. The idea that science and religion are fundamentally, permanently opposed to one another.
Oh, yeah.
That they are bitter enemies fighting a zero-sum war for truth.
Which is pretty much the default assumption in almost all modern discourse. You watch any debate online, and you are forced to pick your team.
It's extremely tribal.
You are either a rational person of science, logic, and empirical data, or you are an irrational person of faith, myth, and religion. We treat them like oil and water.
Exactly. And we have to remember the historical context here.
Right. When was this written?
Pike is writing this in the immediate aftermath of Charles Darwin publishing On the Origin of Species.
Oh, wow. So right in the thick of it.
The intellectual world of the 19th century was violently fracturing between traditional theological dogma and the new empirical sciences.
The ultimate culture war.
But Morals and Dogma refuses to accept that fracture. It presents science, religion, and philosophy not as enemies, but as a deeply interconnected grand trinity.
A trinity.
They are three necessary complementary parts of a single engine of truth.
How does he define their individual roles within that trinity? Because they clearly do different things.
In this framework, science is tasked with studying the observable material world. It measures, weighs, categorizes, and discovers the physical laws of reality.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
The how.
Philosophy is tasked with interpreting the meaning of those scientific facts. It uses logic to ask why things are the way they are and how human consciousness fits into the equation.
The why.
And religion, or deep spiritual contemplation, connects us to the divine, the infinite, and our ultimate moral purpose.
So they absolutely need each other to form a complete, coherent understanding of reality.
Yes. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Pike asserts something quite beautiful and radically unifying.
What's that?
He says that nature itself is a sacred text, and that the physical, observable universe is a reflection of divine intelligence.
So studying the universe is a religious act.
Exactly. What this profoundly implies is that studying physics or biology or astronomy is not a secular distraction from spiritual growth.
It's part of it.
It is literally studying the mind of the creator. When a scientist looks through an electron microscope at a cell or through the James Webb Space Telescope at a distant nebula, they are reading the handwriting of the divine.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because when you stubbornly separate them, as we so often do today, you get a horribly distorted, flat view of reality.
You miss the whole picture.
I think about it like trying to analyze a beautiful, world-changing masterpiece of a painting. Let's say a masterpiece by Rembrandt.
Okay, good analogy.
If you only use the lens of science, science is going to tell you the exact chemical composition of the oil paint.
Right, the exact pigments used.
It will use spectroscopy to tell you the age of the canvas, the refraction index of the pigments, the precise brushstroke pressure. All those are true, verifiable facts.
Very useful facts, technically.
But they tell you absolutely nothing about why the painting matters to the human heart.
Science gives you the what and the how with perfect clarity, but it is completely blind to the why.
Right. So then you bring in philosophy. Philosophy looks at the Rembrandt and asks what it represents about the human condition.
The context.
What does his revolutionary use of light and shadow say about the duality of human suffering or joy? How does it reflect the cultural zeitgeist of the Dutch Golden Age?
Right, the meaning behind the image.
But then religion, the spiritual lens, looks at the painting and asks what it tells us about the eternal soul, and how gazing at that masterpiece connects our own fleeting existence to something infinite and transcendent.
It's the synthesis that creates the full picture.
Exactly. If you only have the chemistry, you miss the art entirely. You're just looking at expensive dirt smeared on cloth.
Expensive dirt, that's a great way to put it.
But conversely, if you only have the spiritual feeling, but completely ignore the reality of the canvas, if you deny the physical facts of how it was made, you are ungrounded and prone to delusion.
You're floating away.
You literally need all three lenses, the empirical fact, the logical meaning, and the spiritual resonance, to truly appreciate the masterpiece of existence.
That is a wonderful, robust way to encapsulate the fellow craft's perspective.
It just clicks when you think of it that way.
The awakened intellect is taught not to reject any of these tools. You don't reject science in a panic to protect your faith.
Right.
And you don't arrogantly reject the profound mysteries of faith because you have a scientific formula. You synthesize them.
You bring them together.
You realize that a physical fact, discovered by rigorous science, is merely a spiritual truth revealed in the material world. And spiritual truth, if it is actually true, must eventually be able to withstand the scrutiny of philosophical logic.
So for you listening to this, I want you to genuinely challenge yourself right now.
Yeah, this is important.
Consider if you view the world through a fractured, incomplete lens. Do you pride yourself on only seeing the science, the hard, cold, empirical data, and smugly dismiss the deeper spiritual or philosophical dimensions of life as fairy tales?
A lot of people do.
Or, on the flip side, do you lean so heavily into spiritual or dogmatic beliefs that you willfully ignore the observable scientific facts of the natural world? What are you missing by not combining them? What vital part of the painting are you completely blind to?
It is a profound, deeply personal question because the integration of these three disciplines is what builds a sovereign mind.
A sovereign mind.
And that concept of sovereignty perfectly transitions us into the next major and arguably most explosive concept of the text.
This is where it gets really intense.
Because once you recognize this grand interconnectedness of the universe, once you see that science, philosophy, and religion are all harmonious parts of a greater whole, and that your own intellect is capable of synthesizing them, it naturally and radically changes how you view your own place within human society.
Because if you view the universe as this grand interconnected masterpiece where empirical reality and the divine meet within your own awakened mind, you can't just go back to your cubicle on Monday morning and view your middle manager or a politician as a king.
No, you can't.
A cosmic perspective instantly dwarfs human systems.
It elevates the individual far above the transient structures they inhabit. The text states an idea that, in the context of monarchies and dogmatic theocracies, is revolutionary.
What is it?
Man is not made for institutions. Institutions are made for man.
Say that again, because that is incredibly heavy, and it flips our default social conditioning completely upside down. Man is not made for institutions.
Yeah.
Institutions are made for man.
Yes. It means that governments, vast bureaucracies, corporate structures, educational systems, and even organized religious bodies, they have no inherent divine right to exist for their own sake.
They aren't magical.
They all exist merely as tools to serve the development of human beings. Systems must evolve with human growth.
So the institution is subservient to the person.
The institution is a manufactured scaffold created by human beings to facilitate our collective progress. Therefore, the freedom to question and reshape those institutions is a natural, unalienable right.
Now, obviously, whenever we start talking about governments existing only to serve people and freedom as a natural right, we are touching the third rail of political philosophy.
We certainly are, and it's vital to frame this impartially. We're simply exploring the text's philosophical stance on the hierarchy of existence, without endorsing any specific modern political platform, left or right.
We're just reporting what the text says.
Exactly. The text is making an epistemological and moral point. The human soul, the awakened intellect of the fellow craft, is the primary enduring entity.
The core.
The government or the institution is secondary, a temporary manufactured construct.
Right.
The implications of this hierarchy are vast. It means that when an institution stops serving human development and instead starts demanding that humans blindly serve it to ensure its own survival, the natural order has been profoundly corrupted.
So what does this all mean for our modern lives? I want to use an analogy here that I think perfectly captures Pike's warning, but updated for today.
I'd love to hear it.
Think about algorithmic capture on social media.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
We originally built social media platforms, an institution to serve us. They were tools designed to connect us with old friends, share photos, stay in touch.
Very simple, helpful tools.
But within 5 to 10 years, the dynamic flipped. The algorithms became so powerful that we started serving them.
We became the product.
We started altering our behavior, our political views, and our self-worth just to please the algorithm and generate engagement for the corporation. Pike was diagnosing algorithmic capture in the 1870s.
That is a staggering parallel. Whether it is a 19th century monarchy, a bloated modern bureaucracy, or a digital algorithm, the danger is exactly the same. The tool becomes the master.
And we just let it happen.
And the text doesn't just treat freedom from these systems as a nice perk like getting extra vacation days. It treats freedom as a profound, incredibly heavy duty.
Freedom as a burden rather than a relief.
Exactly. If you are the primary entity and institutions are just tools, it means the individual have an absolute moral duty to think freely, to challenge systemic injustice, and to seek truth beyond mere authority.
You can't pass the buck.
You cannot just point to the government or the CEO or the algorithm and say, well, they set the rules, so I just followed them.
But if institutions are just tools that we built, why do we so often act like we are the ones serving them?
It's a psychological trap.
Why do we instinctively cower in front of the systems we created? I mean, think about the workplace, or dealing with the DMV, or vast governmental bureaucracies. We treat them like they are inevitable forces of nature, like a thunderstorm that we just have to quietly endure.
It comes down to human psychology, and it is deeply related to the comfort of blind obedience versus the hard, exhausting work of sovereign thought.
Comfort versus work.
If you truly accept the fellow craft premise that institutions are made for you, then you simultaneously accept the grueling responsibility of fixing them, challenging them, and ensuring they remain just.
And that's exhausting.
That is terrifying hard work. It is much, much easier. It requires far less cognitive load to simply surrender your autonomy and let the institution do the thinking for you.
It's cognitive offloading on a societal scale.
Precisely. You tell yourself, the system is too big, it's too complex, I am just a tiny cog in an unimaginably vast machine.
Just get my head down.
I will just keep my head down, do my job, and follow the rules. But the fellowcraft mindset completely forcefully rejects the cog mentality.
Because we are cogs.
It forces us to remember that we are the architects. Human beings built the machine. And if the machine is crushing people, the architect has a moral obligation to redraw the blueprints.
It's the ultimate shift in perspective. You walk into a giant, imposing corporate office or a massive government building with marble columns, and instead of feeling small and intimidated, you realize,
This all made up.
right, all of this concrete, all of this paperwork, all of these rules were invented by people no smarter than me, simply to serve human needs. If it's no longer serving human needs, it is entirely obsolete.
That is a very powerful realization.
But taking on that perspective, living with that constant awareness, that is a massive burden.
It is an immense burden.
Ah.
Taking on the responsibility to constantly challenge institutions, to think freely, to absolutely refuse to accept the status quo simply because it's comfortable, it requires a very specific, highly refined kind of character.
Which is hard to build.
And this brings us directly to the final major theme of the text, what it views as the true, ultimate purpose of education.
Because education isn't just about getting a piece of paper so you can get a comfortable job functioning as a well-paid cog in one of those institutions.
Right. With the kind of deep, synthesized knowledge we've been discussing comes the profound responsibility to actively question assumptions, to avoid blind acceptance, and to actively, aggressively seek truth.
Even when it's hard.
And the text offers a stark, realistic warning. Truth is almost always profoundly misunderstood. It is heavily resisted by the masses, it is attacked by institutions whose power is threatened by it, and it is painfully, agonizingly slow to prevail.
Let me stop you there. Why is it resisted?
Human nature.
If truth is so universally great, if it's the highest good, why is human history just one long record of us violently fighting against it?
Because truth demands change. It is fundamentally disruptive.
Oh, people hate disruption.
If an institution is deeply corrupt, exposing the truth of that corruption demands immediate, difficult action. It demands dismantling the power structure.
Right, which those in power don't want.
On a personal level, if a habit you have is destructive, acknowledging the truth of that destruction demands you undergo the painful process of changing your lifestyle.
The friction again?
People and the institutions they build resist truth because the status quo, even an incredibly miserable one, is familiar. It is predictable.
It's comfortable in a sick way.
Truth is unpredictable and demands sacrifice. Therefore, education is meant to do far more than just make you intellectually smart. It is meant to develop the profound wisdom we talked about earlier, to fortify your moral character, and to prepare individuals to actually contribute to society despite the massive, inevitable resistance they will face.
It builds the emotional and moral muscle needed to actually carry the weight of the truth.
Precisely. And the text gives a dire, incredibly prescient warning about what happens when education focuses only on intellect and fails to build that moral character.
A warning.
It introduces the terrifying concept of dangerous knowledge.
Dangerous knowledge.
Without the scaffolding of wisdom, knowledge is ineffective at best. At worst, it is misused and poses an existential threat. We have seen this historically over and over again, particularly in the century since this text was written.
Intellect divorced from moral character.
That is what allows brilliant minds to design weapons of mass destruction.
You think of the Manhattan Project, some of the most awakened intellects in human history, gathering in the desert to crack the ultimate secrets of physical reality, only to realize they had built a mechanism capable of ending humanity.
That's chilling.
Oppenheimer quoting Hindu scripture, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds."
That is the ultimate historical manifestation of dangerous knowledge. It is the intellect operating without the moral grounding of the Trinity we discussed.
Right.
You also see it in brilliant engineers implementing oppressive panoptic surveillance systems for dictatorships or financial quants engineering, incredibly complex derivatives that eventually crash the global economy and ruin millions of lives.
They're smart, but not wise.
The intellect in all those cases is highly awakened, vastly superior to the average person, but the moral character, the wisdom, is entirely absent.
I want to give an analogy here. Giving raw, unfiltered knowledge and intellectual power to someone without first developing their moral character is like dropping a 1,000 horsepower twin-turbo Ferrari engine into a cheap car that has no steering wheel and absolutely no brakes.
That is a terrifying image, but it captures the exact mechanical failure Pike is warning about.
Right. It's incredibly powerful. It's incredibly loud. It looks deeply impressive to everyone watching it rev up, but it is 100% guaranteed to crash.
And hurt people.
And it will likely take innocent bystanders out with it. The steering wheel is the moral character. The brakes are the wisdom to know when not to use your power.
The restraint.
True education has to meticulously install the steering wheel and test the brakes long before it ever upgrades the engine.
Which is why true learning, as defined by the Fellowcraft stage, is an internal structural transformation, not an external accumulation of data.
It changes who you are.
You aren't just bolting shiny new facts onto the outside of your brain so you can sound smart at dinner parties. You are fundamentally transforming your internal character, rewiring your spiritual and moral circuitry so that you can safely and effectively wield the immense power of knowledge.
So as we bring this all together, ask yourself, you, listening to this right now in your car or at the gym or washing dishes, are you actively questioning the default assumptions in your own life?
Are you looking past the surface?
Are you engaging with the friction of difficult ideas to build new neural pathways? Or are you just coasting on blind acceptance because it requires less energy?
It's the essential question.
Are you doing the hard work of building the steering wheel and the brakes? Or are you just endlessly revving the engine of your intellect with random trivia and hot takes?
It is the defining, inescapable question of this phase of the journey. The Fellowcraft cannot hide behind ignorance anymore.
And what a massive, challenging journey it is. Let's try to synthesize all of this because we have covered incredible philosophical ground today.
We really have.
We started with the Fellowcraft's ultimate realization that our minds are built to learn not through the passive consumption of plain facts, but through the deliberate friction, mystery, and cognitive labor of decoding symbols.
The escape room of the mind.
Right. We learned that we must aim for the deep moral application of wisdom, totally rejecting the modern trap of merely hoarding inert knowledge.
We then explored how a sovereign mind synthesizes the grand trinity of science, philosophy, and religion.
The three lenses.
We use all three lenses to view the universe holistically, refusing to look at the masterpiece of existence through a fractured, polarized lens.
We recognize that this cosmic perspective elevates human growth and freedom far above rigid manufactured institutions, forcing us to remember that we are the original architects of our systems, not helpless cogs trapped inside them.
We are not made for the institution.
And finally, we accepted the heavy, often dangerous moral burden of true education. The absolute necessity of building the moral character required to wield knowledge safely and to challenge a world that constantly, violently resists the truth.
And amidst all of this heavy lifting, we must remember Pike's final, perhaps most humbling point in this entire chapter. Truth is a lifelong, unceasing pursuit.
It never ends.
No single political system, no single holy book, no single philosophical school contains all truth. Our understanding of the universe must constantly, relentlessly evolve.
The work is never done.
The search itself, the continuous act of pulling yourself up the mountain handhold by handhold, is the growth. The Fellowcraft is no longer a passive stone being cut. They are forever an active seeker of light.
Which sets the stage perfectly for where this vast intellectual architecture goes next. In future explorations, we will eventually look toward the next stage of this journey, the master, where all this fractured knowledge, all this agonizing friction, and all this lived experience begin to finally unite into an even deeper, profound realization of reality.
The profound transition from the relentless seeker to the one who begins to truly comprehend the unified whole of existence.
But for now, as we wrap up this stage, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over. It's a concept that builds on everything we've talked about today, deeply rooted in the text, but expanding beyond it.
Okay, what is it?
If no single system or institution contains all truth, and if the search for truth is truly a lifelong pursuit that never ever actually reaches a final destination, does ultimate wisdom lie not in what you finally manage to figure out, but in your total unshakable comfort with realizing exactly how much you still don't know?
Oh, that's brilliant.
Are we, in the end, just trying to get comfortable operating in the murky, mysterious waters of our own endless curiosity?
This raises an important question, perhaps the most important one. A mind perfectly comfortable with its own infinite ignorance, yet still driven to seek, is perhaps the most truly awake mind of all.
Keep questioning the given. Keep seeking the friction. Keep thinking for yourself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We will